Good afternoon, and welcome to episode 2 of Sports Digest by Jason Shelton, a sports audio podcast by Jason Shelton. Today is episode 2, and I will be discussing the college football landscape. The name of this episode is the College Football Realignment Landscape because of all the different things that have happened within college football over the last few years. You all know what I'm talking about. Coming from anything recruiting to the new NIL era. This is going to explain all aspects of college football and why we're just a few short weeks away from week 0. August 24th, 2024 is week 0. But today is Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. Hope you are all having a great day. And welcome to episode 2 of Sports Digest. So, this is really me explaining the realignment in college football because there was a lot of moves prior years to move out of different conferences and how each school gets grouped by their own ranking. Like, I think the Big Ten added 4 teams, that being Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA, and then you have the SEC that added Texas and Oklahoma this past year, and how that impact scheduling, all that, plus the Big 12 adding Colorado, and a couple others. I got to see the full list. But, yeah, Colorado. Here, I'll find the whole list for you all. And I will explain to you each conference change. So the Big Ten got 4 additions, bringing their total to 18 teams. They added Oregon, UCLA, USC, Washington, adding on to a very stacked Big Ten in Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Maryland, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Northwestern, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, and Wisconsin. In the Big 12, they're adding 4 teams, meaning their grand total is going to be 16 teams. They added Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah, while only having 2 leaving. The 2 leaving from the Big 12 are Oklahoma and Texas, and as noted earlier, they're joining the SEC. But the Big 12 now consists of Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, Baylor, BYU, Cincinnati, University of Houston, Iowa State, Kansas, and Kansas State, which is going to be a really fun rivalry, in my opinion, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, UCF, and West Virginia. Now the ACC, they added 3 teams as well, bringing their total team count to 18. They added SMU, California, and Stanford. And now their team also including those 3, are Boston College, Clemson, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a independent FBS school, quote unquote, but they'll be a part of the ACC in the future. North Carolina, North Carolina State, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. And now the main conference, I think one of the 2 biggest conferences in the whole country. I think the best 2 conferences are the Big Ten and the SEC. But they added OU in Texas, Oklahoma, Texas. Now that'll add to the Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, LSU, Mississippi, Mississippi State, Missouri, South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Vanderbilt. And the only team that really got screwed out of the entire realignment is the Pac-12. They only have 2 schools left, that being Oregon State and Washington State. Now, I don't know how they're going to play some of their schedule. I mean, their scheduling needs to be worked a little bit, but who in the right mind would just leave the Pac-12 empty? I don't know if it's going to stay empty like this forever, but it's just weird having just two teams in a conference that was really competitive last year. I mean, look at how far Washington got, and with Michael Penix and Roma Dunze, et cetera, et cetera. But to have only two teams in the conference, that's just kind of weird. When you go, like, have Oregon move and branch out to the Big Ten, which they also have a new media home, that being the Big Ten on CBS instead of the SEC on CBS, which it kind of ticks me off to know that, because the Big Ten reserves that right now instead of the SEC, instead of the ba 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 ba, and you got Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson saying, "And we welcome you to Ann Arbor, Michigan," or whatnot. But no, I think the SEC should have definitely tried to renew their media rights with CBS. But the SEC does have a new media home. It is ABC and ESPN. That's where majority of their games are going to be in, but that's understandable. The SEC and Big Ten and all these other conferences have big markets and a lot of money to spend on exclusive TV rights. Basically what a TV right is, how much money like an ESPN or Fox or CBS is going to spend for, I think it's like 8 seasons. I don't know how long exactly a CBA TV deal is in the SEC. Probably 8 years, over a couple $100 million. Yeah, more money than anybody, really. It basically just fund money to these TV networks so they can show the games. That's basically what a media rights deal is. Whenever you see that in like a headline, media rights deal is basically just how long you're going to show your team for that cable network. Like just ABC and ESPN would cover the SEC, and that's a really big media rights deal for the SEC. It means they're going to get a lot more money, and they're going to be playing a lot more of their players because of the new NIL era, which is perfect into the first thing I want to talk about, the NIL era. Yeah, so with the NIL era, I'm not really in favor of paying players, because you're technically already giving these players a lot. You're giving them pretty much tuition, housing, student housing, giving them all these resources and developmental things, and paying them just adds on to that whole mess. I think that they're obviously going to be paid because of the new college football video game that's coming out. Shout out to EA and their team for making that possible after waiting, people like me, for almost 11 years for that game to come out. And it comes out next Friday, but some people ordered the deluxe version, and you can get it early on July 16th and start playing then. Pretty sure you get a 3-day early access beta if you buy the deluxe version of the game, which, to be honest, I didn't want to do that, but I think a lot of people are excited for that video game to come out, including myself. That's gonna be a really fun time. Anyways, as I was saying about the NIL era, that players make these endorsement deals and all this other stuff. I'm not the biggest fan of paying players, because you're technically already paying the player a shit ton when it comes to tuition assistance and housing and getting them free shit, pretty much. I'm not saying like they shouldn't get paid, but there's a fine line where there's going to be a star player on your team, right? Let's take the Vols, for example. You got someone like James Pierce Jr., one of the best edge rushers in the country, and then you got some 4th string linebacker, and James Pierce is easily going to make more than that 4th string linebacker. Why not equivalent the pay for each player? Like, each team should have, they probably already have a cap on how much they can pay players, quote unquote. Like, paying them, meaning like they're going to get like NIL deals, NIL sponsorships, and all kind of brand awareness stuff. Like that only promotes the player's individual brand. From my understanding, because Caleb Williams did this a lot. He probably got a bag from USC and Lincoln Riley. Let's be honest, Lincoln Riley definitely broke some rules, but you know what? It doesn't matter now because you can break all the rules you want and you're not going to get in trouble for it because you can pay the players now. And I've always been iffy about it, but let me know what you guys think in this poll. Do you think that college football players should be paid based on their own merit? I think no, but it's a new world. I mean, you can get paid for pretty much just doing anything and promoting their own brand. That's pretty much what they get paid for. But good for them, though. They're world star athletes, and they get paid at an elite level. So, about the conference realignments, which is my next segment in this show, and like I said before, the Pac-12 really got screwed with just Oregon State and Washington State left. I don't know how they're going to do that. I really don't know. I don't know their schedule, really. I'm not that deep dived into schedules, but it's just really awful. So I'm going to get to the main conferences and go over what I think is going to be really good. So starting in the Big Ten, I think that once you have Oregon and USC, Washington, UCLA all get their shit together basically and make that seamless transition into the Big Ten. They go up against, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. Some of them do. Pretty sure Oregon has Penn State later in the year. I don't know for sure, though. I'm going to double check with their schedule. And, yeah, Oregon's schedule for this year is Idaho, Boise State, at Oregon State, at UCLA, home to Michigan State, home to Ohio State, at Purdue, home to Illinois, at Michigan, which will be a really fun game. That's going to be a guaranteed watch game. And November 2nd, 2024, that's when it's going to happen. Oregon at Michigan, that's going to be a really good game. Maryland at Oregon, Oregon at Wisconsin, and then Washington at Oregon to close it out. I think they can do really good. I mean, they did lose Bo Nix, Bucky Irving, and a lot of others. But they still got Dylan Gabriel from the portal. They got Evan Stewart. They got Tez Johnson still. They got Trayshawn Holden. I think they lost Franklin. Oh, man, I forgot what their big wide receiver was last year. It was like Franklin. They lost him in the draft. They still got Gary Bryant Jr. They still got plenty of pieces offensively and defensively to make a really good run for the Big Ten. And who knows, they might win it their first year, but I doubt that. I think it's probably going to be Ohio State that wins their selective conference, but I wouldn't be surprised if it would be an Ohio State-Oregon Big Ten championship. Now, Ohio State's schedule is also very, very easy. Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, at Michigan State, Iowa comes to Columbus, at Oregon, which, let me just remind you all, that Week 7, pretty sure, Week 7 of college football is going to be the most watched week of the whole year. There's so many good games from that October 12th window. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up right now. Look up October 12th, college football playoff, or college football, not college football playoff, college football schedule Week 7. And I will tell you right now, that is probably the best schedule you will ever see out of a conference, out of a week of college football in general. Best week ever if you're a college football fan. October 12th, 2024. It's pretty damn good. It's a pretty damn good lineup, and it's great. We finish off this Ohio State schedule at Oregon, obviously, on October 12th. You should all be there, or you should all at least tune into that. That's going to be a really fun game to watch. Nebraska, Ohio State, then at Penn State. Purdue comes to Columbus, then at Northwestern, then Indiana, then Michigan comes to Columbus this year. And the reigning national champions, they're not going to do as good as they did last year. Don't think so, because one, they lost their head coach and a lot of other key pieces on that team, like J.J. McCarthy and others, like Corum, to name a couple. But they still got Donovan Edwards. Don't count out Michigan. They can very easily make a run and make the 12-team playoff, which is something we need to talk about in just a minute. Let me talk to you guys about the 12-team playoff from a year ago and years past. All right, back on this Wednesday afternoon, talking about the college football realignments, and now the 12-team playoffs. Now, how this will work from 4 teams to 8 teams. Sorry about my cat, by the way. From 4 to 8 teams. No, from 4 to 12 teams. Basically styled in, each conference has their own winner, and then the rest is filled in from record and how they finished well with their record in the conference. Now, I kind of like the 12-team portal instead of being playoff, instead of being 4, because with a 4-team playoff, you're going to have those arguments like we did this past year with Florida State being 12-0. It was Alabama, Texas, Washington, and who was Michigan? Did I say Michigan? I'm pretty sure I already said Michigan. But the 4 teams, we had a discussion about Florida State being 12-0, and even a couple years ago we had TCU. With that whole shenanigans, TCU made the playoffs, by the way, and they made the big national championship, but they got their asses handed to by a Georgia team, which shows no sign of giving out. I mean, that SEC championship game was pretty damn good for it being the last one. It's on CBS. And let me just say, Kirby Smart has been doing an absolute crazy job since he took over there in 2017. Absolutely insane. It's insane to see the turnover rate from someone like Kirby Smart coming from a Saban. And, working on his own team, and now they're probably the best team in the country. Still, I think they'll be 1 in the preseason rankings, and they'll probably do good this year too. But the 12-team playoff pool is pretty interesting to look at, because it's like you have a chance to make the playoffs now, and it's going to be on a home field. Whoever is hosting that game, it's going to be on their field. And it's going to be really fun to watch. And, as a spectator of college sports, you like the open tournament and having, not voted in teams, but just having teams that belong there, not Mickey Mouse fraud bullshit teams that shouldn't be there, like a washed Auburn team shouldn't be in the college football playoff this year. I was just giving Auburn as an example, but you get my point. There should be no real bad teams, quote unquote, that are in the playoffs. But there's going to be a G5 team, I'm pretty sure, and then 11 others are going to be filled by how well your record is against your own conference opponents, your overall record, and your strength of schedule. I'm pretty sure that's the 3 main things that the College Football Committee, aka a bunch of gatekeepers that just vote in who they think is going to win for the playoffs. Let me take a sip of water real quick. The water was much needed as I'm reaching 20 minutes. But basically with the College Football Committee, they do their, deep search and why they think this team should be in the playoff. But overall, it should be on how well you did in your conference and where you match up against that conference champions. Like, if I were to say, the Vols are going to make the college football playoff as the 10th seed, I would see the SEC championship game for this year, see how they pit against an Alabama or a Georgia, or heck, even Texas might win the SEC this year. But regardless, you can have 9 wins and still make the playoff, because 9-3 is pretty good. That's not my record prediction for the Vols yet. I'll explain that later. But you should give every team an equal chance to get in, regardless of... you're really just going to put the top 2 teams from each Power 5 conference, and that's what's going to make up 10 of the 12 playoff spots, and the next 2 are going to be determined by their record. Like, you're going to have a G5 school in the playoffs, and then your 11th spot is going to be some team that has a better record than another team, even though the other team might have shown more promise than the team that should have been in it versus the team that got the spot. But that's all up to the committee and all the people that make that whole world happen for our own enjoyment. Notice how I said that, for our own enjoyment. Yeah, the College Football Committee basically just wants people to watch their game, which we all collectively do, and by that committee, you're going to have a bunch of different media portals or media deals that sometimes fall through, but they're always going to get us with, college football, because it's one of the most watched sports in the world, if not the most watched. It's not the most watched sport in the world, but most watched sport in the United States, and it's important to all of us. We live with college football, and the fact is, with all of these conferences, with all these teams moving to different conferences in the coming years, from now to then, like with the Pac-12 falling out, and with how the Big 12 really kind of became a decent conference now, and then you got the SEC and Big 10 basically controlling the levers of college football, but that's how it's going to be. Those are the 2 biggest conferences by market size. The SEC and Big 10 are obviously the 2 biggest. But now I'm going to segue from talking about how the playoffs are going to be to talking about my personal team, the Tennessee Volunteers. Now, the Tennessee Vols, they went 9-3 last year, losing to Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and I'm pretty sure there was another team that we lost to, but I can't. In Missouri, yeah, we lost to Missouri and Columbia. We went 8-4, not 9-3. I don't know why I was thinking 9-3, but yeah, we beat Iowa in the Cheez-It Bowl, 35-0, and that was one of the bigger points in playing. Was how well Nico was going to be in his first start. I don't want to say his first start, because he's definitely played in games, and he's going to be able to use that red shirt, because I'm pretty sure the rule is you can't you can't red shirt if you have started in 5 or more games, or 4 or more games. You can't use the red shirt ability. And basically, I think Nico, bowl games don't count towards eligibility, by the way. And I think Nico is going to have that red shirt freshman, what's it called? Classification. He's going to be a red shirt freshman this year, even though he has shown glimpses this past year that he can be phenomenal. And he very well could be the next greatest Tennessee Vols quarterback, probably since the 22 run with Hendon Hooker. Now, in 2022, we may or not know this, but Hendon Hooker was basically not our whole offense, but he definitely jump-started everything coming from Virginia Tech from 2020, from a couple years prior, and, not really becoming a really good quarterback. And in that same portal, we got Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker. Let me drink this water real quick, but I'll talk about Hendon Hooker, and then moving from Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton to Nico Iamaleava. So going from a Hendon Hooker to Nico Iamaleava is about as well as it sounds. Well, Joe Milton did pretty decent this past year. I mean, he had some games where he could have done better, and the whole team could have done better. Like, the first game that comes to mind was the Florida game, because that game was really bad, and I don't know where our effort was, and we lost that effort. And then same thing in Tuscaloosa. We probably could have beat Bama, but let's be real. Alabama is going to beat every team that comes to Alabama, and they don't have Nick Saban anymore. They're going from the Kalen DeBoer route from Washington. Basically flipped Washington to Alabama, and Alabama's still going to finish a top 10 team. Better best believe it. But anyways, back to Tennessee. Who gives a fuck about Alabama? Tennessee, going from that style of offense with Hendon Hooker, and it's no longer Alex Golish's job to call the plays. It's Joey Hazel. Pretty sure that's what his name is, Joey Hazel. And seeing how that will work. And I think it could work really well in Nico's favor. Now, it might be as flashy, if not a little bit better, than the Hendon Hooker offense that we saw with Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Nefarious Fant, Princeton Fant, and, all those pieces. But I think with having Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton, Squirrel White, I'm pretty sure Mike Matthews, a couple other big-time wide receivers, also including Caleb Webb, Nico has really a lot of great weapons on offense that he can easily throw to. Plus, with the backfield of Dylan Sampson and Cameron Seldon, that's pretty good in my opinion. And right now, I think the Vols easily could have 10 wins. They could very much well have 10 wins on their schedule for this year. And also, Dylan Sampson is a great shining light to this running back room from what I see and from what I saw last 2 years. And same thing with Cameron Seldon. I'm pretty sure, though, that things going to start over. Dylan Sampson's going to start over Cameron Seldon because he is a little more experienced. But the quarterback room is perfectly fine. I'll go over each position for you guys, just in case you don't know. So with Nico, he's going to be a star in Knoxville. He's going to be a really good quarterback, and I think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. Obviously, you got people like Carson Beck or Jalen Milroe that are the only couple that are ahead of him, but they have more experience, and that tends to favor better for their program. But I think Nico is going to be really good his first year starting as a quarterback. That's going to be really fun to watch in Knoxville, and seeing all that play out in his first year. I think it'll be a good year for Nico Iamaleava. So we've gone over Nico. So their whole quarterback room, by the way, just to brighten your memory, sorry for clearing my throat, is Nico Iamaleava. See, saying that name is just kind of, it rolls off the tongue kind of weird. But yeah, Nico Iamaleava. I'm just going to say Nico instead of Nico Iamaleava. Nico, Gaston Moore, Navy Schuler. And then our running back room would consist of Dylan Sampson, Cameron Seldon, probably Patrick Wick, Nathan Leacock, and then here comes our wide receiver core, like I said earlier, in Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton, Caleb Webb, Squirrel White, Chaz Nimrod. Really deep wide receiver core. Brew McCoy obviously coming back from that leg injury that he suffered against South Carolina last year, and seeing how he will play will impact this 2024 Vols offense. I guarantee you, because a healthy Brew is really good for this Vols football team. I mean, we've seen how he's done in 2022. We saw the LSU game. We saw the Alabama game, how he came up big with that catch at the end. And, Brew is overall a great veteran player for these freshmen, sophomores to look up to, like someone like Squirrel White or Caleb Webb to look up to and be like, hey, that's who I want to model my game after. And Brew is a great leader in a sense that he can do that and provide that chip on his shoulder. Coming from USC and Texas, this is going to be his third year in Knoxville, and this is probably going to be his last year because he is a graduate transfer, and he's used all 3 years of his eligibility, with 2024 being his last year of eligibility. Moving on to tight ends, it's probably going to run of Ethan Davis, Charlie Browder, and Hunter Salmon. Now, offensive line might be a little iffy, but I think they can do a really good job of protecting, mainly with the Cooper Mays and Javonte Spraggins. That's the main two that just, haul and run protection, pass pro. Best two offensive linemen in the country are, Cooper Mays and Javonte Spraggins. Plus, you got people like John Campbell Jr., Mo Clipper Jr., Ollie Lane, Cooper Mays, Gerald Mincy, Masai Reddick, and Shamarad Umarov, who's a freshman. It's just on their roster. But where I would be excited as a Vols fan is their defensive side with someone like James Pierce and getting a return. I'm pretty sure getting a return from Norman Lott, James Pierce, Elijah Simmons, Amari Thomas is those are two big defensive tackles that are coming back for the Vols this coming year. Elijah Simmons and Amari Thomas. And no matter however you shape it, plus you got a David Hobbs, you got a Caleb Herring still running strong. It's going to be amazing. Plus, having James Pierce, if you ever seen James Pierce play, he has one of the fastest get-offs in college football, meaning he can get to the quarterback in no less than 3 seconds, and he just uses pure speed over any side of the ball. Like, you can line him up on the left side, you can line him up on the right side, and he will just go after the quarterback just as a free edge rusher. And that's what James Pierce has done for this Vols team, and he's going to be one of the best defensive players in college football in general, because he's going to put up pretty good numbers because he's got Rodney Gardner as his defensive line coach, and rightfully so, he should make a really good year. Now, linebackers, it's going to be Arion Carter, Ben Bolton, Will Albright, Jalen Smith, Keenan Peely, and Caleb Williams. Not the Chicago Bears Caleb Williams, the Tennessee linebacker Caleb Williams. Just throwing that out there because you might get a little confused. But linebackers, I'm fine with the group that the Vols have now. It's very deep. This whole roster, for that matter, is deep. And corners, no difference. You got Christian Charles, Warren Burrell, Jack Luttrell, Ricky Gibson III, Malik Gonaway, Brandon Turnage, Andre Turrentine, John Slaughter, Danico Slaughter. I think Danico Slaughter is actually going to play out his 5th year. He might be leaving. I'm not 100% sure on that. But that was our team last year also, plus Tamarian McDonald and Brandon Turnage, if I haven't mentioned them already. And, I think we have a really good secondary. And I'm not saying that because it's the Vols, but I'm just saying that because I'm very confident in our team and what we can do this year and how Nico is going to transform, literally, this team from really, really bad. Like, I think in the earlier years of Mike Vrabel, he had the mantra of going from good to great. And I think that's what Nico's going to do for the Tennessee Vols in 2024. He's going to take a really good football team and make them great. Shout out to Mike Vrabel, man. Love your Braves wherever you are. You can be in Cleveland coaching them linebackers, and Braves, I still got a soft spot for you. Shout out Braves, dude. He's the man. He's really the best damn head coach that I've ever seen. Cool dude too. Anyways, with special teams being Jackson Ross and JT Carver and Charles Campbell, I think we're just fine, just where we are. Now, I kind of want to get into, going from our roster and how we've turned some things. Plus, there was some breaking news today that Chandavion Bradley has left the Tennessee football team. And how I got that was from Vol Report. Shout out to Vol Report. And he basically broke the news at 2 o'clock Eastern time this afternoon. Chandavion Bradley, Tennessee defensive end, will be transferring away from Tennessee. And it is believed that he will end up at Hutchinson Community College. I wish him nothing but the best for him, and hope that Bradley does great at Hutchinson, and may he do well there. So with Bradley coming out of Knoxville, that kind of hinders our defensive line, but it's really not going to be that bad. Now, with that being said, we're going to need filler players like Omar Newman-Lott, Elijah Simmons, Elijah Herring to make tremendous strides to, be better up on the roster and keeping our roster as deep as possible without getting injured. Biggest thing in maintaining a football team is trying to avoid injury by any means necessary. And what that means is going through treatment and all that jazz, and really just going through all that, make sure no one gets hurt through training camp, God forbid, and then making sure the team stays healthy throughout the year, which more likely than not, they're not gonna stay healthy throughout the year. But should someone go down, it's next man up mentality. Like, you are going to be starting for this team now, and you are definitely going to play a bigger role as a freshman than you would be if you were playing last year as a junior. But you're going to play in a bigger role for this team, and you're going to really just hit it home. And that's what I think the Tennessee Vols need to do in order to be successful, is just, relying on their own instinct and making sure they don't get too silly with the ball. No turnovers is successful in this league. And to make sure that you get no turnovers is to make sure you don't throw an interception or fumble it, or make sure that everything goes fine. Obviously, you're going to have some turnovers, but hopefully not many. So I'm going to go over the schedule with you guys now and break down each game individually and give you guys a prediction on what I think the Vols are going to do this year. So now I will be going over the 2024 Tennessee Volunteers schedule and my thoughts about how well they're going to do this year. I think they're going to overall do pretty good, and I think their record is going to stay between the 9-3 and the 10-2 range, with the only 2 losses being from at Georgia and home against Alabama. It's only 2 teams I really see them losing to in their schedule. But I'll read you off their schedule now. All right, Saturday, August 31st, week 1, they play the Chattanooga Mocs in Knoxville, and then they play NC State in the Dukes Mayo Classic, quote-unquote Classic Bowl, and then they are home against Kent State, then at Oklahoma on September 21st, then at Arkansas, home against Florida, home against Bama, bye week, home against Kentucky, home against Mississippi State. So 4 straight home games in that October, early November window. Then at Georgia, then home against University of Texas El Paso, aka UTEP, then at Vanderbilt. Now, first game of the year, they're going to beat the Mocs. So I think that's just going to be a bloodbath. Yeah. Next week, they play NC State. North Carolina State is not a terrible team, but they're in that middle range of being okay. They're a C-tier team, and I think the Vols take this game handily, and Nico shines out in prime time because this is a prime time 7:30 kickoff on ABC, and that's gonna be a really good game because it's one of the first games of the year, and it's the Dukes Mayo Classic Bowl, and that game's playing in Charlotte in the Panthers stadium. All right, then versus Kent State, which that's a layup for the Vols. They should easily take care of business there. Now, this is where their first challenge is at Oklahoma in Norman. It's going to be a really tough crowd. They might actually drop that game and bump them down to 3-1. I'm gonna give them the L on that one. Actually, I don't think they can beat Oklahoma in Norman. I just don't think that they can go to Norman and beat Oklahoma. But that's just me now. Watch them win day of. Moving right along, at Arkansas, I think they win that game, go to 4-1, bounce back from the horrendous loss. Plus, they had a bye week in between Oklahoma and Arkansas. If you see the schedule, you'll understand that they have a bye week on September 28th. They don't play that week, but they beat Arkansas in Fayetteville, and they go to 4-1. And then rivalry week, they play Florida in week 7. Now that's that week 7 I was talking about earlier on that October 12th window. Every game on October 12th is must watch. Every single game, including this one. This is probably the most important game up until this point of the season because last year they had a really terrible performance in Gainesville. I saw that firsthand. It was awful. Didn't get anything going. We had a decent passing game, but after the second quarter, it just all hell broke loose, and we lost 29-16 in Gainesville in a game we should have won. But that's last year. This is this year. They get their revenge against Florida in Neyland Stadium, and they beat Florida 5-1. Now, I'm going to be honest with this game. I think Jalen Milroe can easily handle us. I'm not even going to throw why, but Alabama under Kalen DeBoer really depends on how well they're doing up until this point. But I think Alabama's going to take this one away from us. So that's going to make us go down to 4-2 into the second bye week.
Now, home against Kentucky, I think we do win this game, and then we beat Mississippi State right after two really good performances by Nico Iamaleava, and that pushes us up to 6-2, with the 2 losses only being from Alabama and Oklahoma so far. Now, at Georgia, that's going to be a good Tennessee loss right there, and move them down to 6-3. I just don't think that they can really get ahead in Georgia, and Georgia's going to remain that dominant team in the SEC East, and they very well could be in the talking for another national championship, but I think they make it to the SEC championship, and that team is just going to be doing so well. They've been doing so well over the past 4 years, like going back to back in 21 and 22. But the thing about those teams is that they have easily had the best defense in the country for each one of them. So 6-2, 7-2. So that makes it 7-3 on the year. Now, home against UTEP, no problem with this game. They should win this game, moving the Vols to 8-3. And then at Vanderbilt, they should close with a win in Vandy. Vandy, unfortunately, hasn't been good in a long, long time. And that's unfortunate though for Vandy and Vandy fans, because they're slowly coming back up, but they're not good enough to contend for an SEC title just yet. They're a little bit behind, and a little bit behind, I mean a little way behind, because they don't really focus on sports except for baseball. But Vanderbilt, you got a lot of good things going for you. Plus, you guys should be pretty good in a couple years. I'd say 2-3 years, they'll be all right, good enough to make a bowl game. But Vanderbilt, I'm sorry, and you're taking an L on that one, making the overall record prediction of 9-3. Honestly, under Nico's first year, I wouldn't be surprised if we go 9-3. Even 10-2 would be a really good point of just losing to Alabama and Georgia. But 9-3, that's my final prediction, and I think we do pretty good. I mean, you gotta imagine this is Nico's first year starting completely, and he's gonna build that chemistry immediately from spring camp to now, to where they're about to go back into training camp and really just sauce it up. And only time will tell. See how well the Tennessee Volunteers do for the 2024 season. So, with that, 9-3 just feels right with how their schedule is laid out. Yes, you have a really hard schedule in November, or October rather, because you play Florida and then Bama back-to-back, which I think is the toughest stretch of games right there. And then after that home stretch, you go to Georgia and play the Bulldogs, and that's going to be a really tough game. And I think the only other tough game you really got is at Oklahoma, but who knows? Oklahoma might not be that good with Brent Venables, and I don't know. It really depends on how the other teams do in the SEC, and it's going to be a really fun year for college football with all the realignments and all the standings, and it's gonna be a really interesting year of college football, I will say. And there's gonna be a lot more better games this year. And let me read off to you all the October 7th window of college football games, because that is where like a lot of fun games are at. So I'll read that off to you guys right now. So Saturday, October 12th. First games. Ole Miss at LSU, Florida at Tennessee, Washington at Iowa, Ohio State at Oregon, Penn State at USC, Georgia Tech at UNC. The list goes on and on. There's more games that are better. Oh, yeah. Texas at Oklahoma. You have Red River that week. Red River Showdown, by the way, if you didn't know, that's a big rivalry between Texas and Oklahoma. In the SEC, by the way. first time playing the Red River in the SEC, both of them together. Stanford at Notre Dame. But the main 5, though, from that weekend: Ole Miss at LSU, Florida at Tennessee, Ohio State at Oregon, Penn State at USC, and probably Texas at OU. Those are the 5 biggest matchups, to me at least, that week. And that's going to be a really fun week of college football. I also think in week 3 is a really good slate, if I'm not mistaken, with Texas A&M at Florida in the Swamp. That's going to be a really fun game to watch. And then there's another couple of games that can be fun to watch, like Oregon at Oregon State. That's not going to be too fun, but you get what I mean. Some of these games are going to be really fun. Like I said earlier, CBS is picking up Big Ten games, which they started last year, but the whole CBS Big Ten, I don't think they deserve it. But to be honest, the Big Ten did get a lot of really good teams. As I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, that they got Oregon, UCLA, USC, and Washington, which I think the 3:30 format is going to benefit off of that time. Plus, you're going to have a lot more game of the weeks for the SEC. I think I have a schedule of the SEC on the Big Ten. SEC on the Big Ten. Wow, that's crazy. CBS on Big Ten. Like their lineup schedule. And I'll read that all to you guys, which ones are the game of the week, and I'll tell you guys how I feel about this. So here's the full CBS football window. Akron at Ohio State, Iowa State at Iowa the next week, and then September 14th, Notre Dame at Purdue. And then Saturday, September 21st, we have our first really big treat, which is USC at Michigan. And that's going to be on the 3:30 Big Ten on CBS game. And that's going to be really fun to watch. They also have, like, Air Force at Navy, Navy at Air Force at Army, all those regular games. Minnesota at Wisconsin. But they haven't announced the full Big Ten on CBS game schedule yet. But I'm definitely looking forward to the USC at Michigan game on September 21st. That's going to be really fun to watch. Anyways, before I get to the outro, I think this is going to be a really fun year of college football, coming from the 14 playoff pool to the 12 to all the realignments and conferences, going from the Pac-2 of 2 teams to the Big Ten of 18 teams, and the SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma. It's going to be a really fun year for realignment, and not to mention the Big 12, which I haven't mentioned this entire time. Big 12 is one of the better conferences, but it's like up there with the ACC. Like, those are the main Power 5 conferences: the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big 12. Those are the 4 biggest conferences in college football right now. Now here we get to the outro of this, and I would like to thank everybody for listening to episode 2 of Sports Digest. If you haven't already, please click follow and like the podcast. It helps me out personally if you do that, and we can really grow this thing. By we, I mean me. We can all do our part and like it together, and I hope you enjoyed that little breakdown of the college football, the realignment of how college football is getting to be one of the pinnacle sporting events, and with all the big conferences and all the switches to the different conferences, with the ACC getting 3 teams, like the team total for each conferences are getting bigger and bigger, and it really sucks for those 2 Pac-12 teams, Oregon State and Washington State, but I think they'll join a team eventually and, come out of that Pac-12, which unfortunately is kind of disbanded because the Pac-12 is no more anymore. They lost Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah to the Big 12, and they lost Oregon, UCLA, USC, and Washington to the Big 10. Not to mention they lost California and Stanford, which are now in the ACC. SMU is also in the ACC. But I'm going to send it off now. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Sports Digest, a sports podcast hosted by Jason Shelton. And I hope each and every single one of you have an amazing rest of your day, your week, your time. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.